Now, we know, of course, that the people who are hit the hardest by Kamala Harris's terrible policies are very often those who can least afford to pay an extra $100 to go to the grocery store or pay a few hundred extra dollars in rent per month. And, of course, we know that a lot of our senior citizens, are the ones who are living on a fixed income, are the ones who have been hit the hardest by Kamala Harris's inflation. So here is what Donald Trump is going to do. Two big things for our senior citizens in Arizona and all across the country. First of all, we are going to fight to lower grocery and housing prices for all of us. We're going to get back to an affordable American nation. And the second thing, and especially for our seniors, is that Donald Trump, we're going to eliminate taxes on Social Security so that our seniors can afford to live a good life. Now, a lot of you know a little bit about my story. I care about this a lot because, of course, I love our senior citizens. But I also was, in fact, raised by my grandmother because my mom struggled with opioid addiction for a big chunk of my early life. Now, I'm very proud of my mom. She's been clean and sober for 10 years, ladies and gentlemen. That is a great blessing and a good thing. But because I was raised by my grandmother, I know what it's like when our grandmothers and our grandparents are forced to try to make ends meet when everything is getting more expensive. And I think a lot of our grandparents are just saying, could we get a little bit of help? Could you make it easier to afford the things that I need to buy rather than harder? And that's what Donald Trump and I are going to do. Fight for you every single day. We're going to make groceries more affordable. We're going to make housing more affordable. We're going to make the American dream more affordable. And really, my friends, it's actually pretty simple because here's what's happened under the leadership of Kamala Harris. It's always useful to sort of compare and contrast because, you know, I feel bad sometimes for anybody who's listening to Kamala Harris's interviews because there's no specifics, right? I mean, you ask, even with these softball interviews, they'll say, well, what is your specific plan to lower the price of groceries and housing? And Kamala Harris will say, well, I grew up in a middle-class family. Or, you know, they'll say, well, you know, Kamala Harris, the border is wide open. What are you going to do that you haven't done over the last 3.5 years to close down that southern border? And she'll say, well, when I worked at McDonald's, I made the hash browns, and I was very good at it. And anybody with a lick of common sense is saying, Kamala, you haven't actually answered the question. So let me try to talk a little bit about the specifics and the details and the difference between a President Donald Trump and a President Kamala Harris. As much as that is a nightmare, we don't want that, but let's just talk about it. All right, so Kamala Harris's economic plan is to wage war on American energy, drive up the cost of oil, drive up the cost of natural gas, and drive up the cost of everything that requires low energy costs, which is everything that we buy, from the homes that we buy to the food that gets delivered to the grocery store. You know, Donald Trump's plan to bring down energy prices is very simple. It's drill, baby, drill. We got plenty of oil and gas in our own country. Let's get it out of the ground. Kamala Harris is going around the country bragging. I've never seen a politician bragging about raising taxes on American citizens and then rewarding companies that ship American jobs overseas, and I think that gets it exactly backwards. Donald Trump is going to lower your taxes, and we're going to punish the companies that are shipping American jobs overseas. We want to build more right here in the United States of America. You know, Kamala Harris wants to open. They came into office. They came into office bragging that they were going to undo all of Donald Trump's border policies, and then that is exactly what they did. So Kamala Harris wants to open the border and roll out the red carpet for illegal immigration in this country. Donald Trump's plan is simple: build the wall and send people who came here illegally back home. We got to focus on our own citizens. Now, I know we talked about senior citizens earlier. You know, there's a big lie at the heart of the Kamala Harris campaign. I don't know where she gets this because for 4 years, Donald Trump was the president of the United States. And what do we have? Again, rising take-home pay, low inflation. It was a very good 4 years for the American people. But now she's come up with this lie because she's trying to scare our senior citizens. She's trying to say that somehow Donald Trump is going to go after Social Security and Medicare. Well, you know what Donald Trump's plan is to protect Social Security and Medicare? Make sure that those benefits go to the people who paid for them and not illegal aliens. Because Kamala goes around the country, she has said explicitly that she wants to give Social Security and Medicare benefits to people who don't have the legal right to be in this country in the first place. And that would bankrupt our country faster than anything, is giving these benefits to people who don't deserve to be in the United States in the first place. And I remember this came up during the debate. Tim Walz said, well, we're not mad, and we want to be compassionate for immigrants. We want to be compassionate for everybody. Look, I don't disagree with that. I agree that we ought to be compassionate, but our compassion as American leaders belongs first to American citizens and people who have the legal right to be here. And my friends, there is nothing compassionate about bankrupting our country by giving benefits to people, rewarding people for breaking our laws to enter the country in the first place. So, to every person who has come into the country illegally under Kamala Harris's leadership, Kamala Harris wants to roll out the red carpet, give free health care and housing benefits. Donald Trump has a different idea. Donald Trump's plan is pretty simple. In 4 months, pack your bags because you're going back to where you came from. Now, here's the problem, and here's what the media never talks about when it comes to illegal immigration. They talk about compassion, and of course, we want to be compassionate to everybody, but one way you're not compassionate is when you encourage Mexican drug cartels to engage in sex trafficking, many times of literal children. It is not compassionate to open the border and allow the Mexican drug cartels to get rich by selling poison to our citizens. It is not compassionate to allow the Mexican drug cartels to sex traffic children into the United States of America, and it is not compassionate to allow hundreds of thousands of American citizens to die of fentanyl overdoses. Our message to Kamala Harris is yes, we are a compassionate people, which is why we want to secure the damn border, and the only way we're going to do it is if we elect Donald J. Trump. So we're gonna actually take some questions from the reporters here, and I know we've got a lot of local reporters, and we're gonna focus. No, the local reporters are good. We're gonna start with the local reporters, but I want to leave you with just a couple of final thoughts here. First of all, the state of Arizona, the difference in 2020 was 11,000 votes. 11,000 votes. Okay. So what we need to do, and you hear Donald Trump say it all the time, is we need to swamp the vote in the United States of America, and that starts right here in Arizona. So, a few things I'm going to ask you for. Number one, I see a lot of you are taking photos. By all means, pull out your phones, take a photo, take a selfie of yourself or your friends and your family here at this event. Just do it very slowly. The Secret Service gets very nervous when I tell people to, pull your phones out of your pocket, but post on social media, send a text message, send an email, let people know why you were here, but most importantly, let people know why you want Donald J. Trump to be the next president of the United States of America. That people power, that person-to-person engagement, my friends, that's how we're going to win this election. We're never going to get a fair shake from Kamala Harris or her media allies, but we can tell the truth to one another. So get out there and talk to every single person you can about the importance of saving this country. And the best way to do it over the next couple of weeks is to get people out there to vote for Donald J. Trump and all of our great candidates here in the state of Arizona. That's the first request that I'm going to make of you. Second request is go to this website, swampthevoteusa.com, and I'll repeat it, swampthevoteusa.com. What you can do with that website is check your registration, check where you're able to vote, check your polling location, and also get some tips on how to encourage your friends and family to get out there and vote. Because again, this is a lot of fun, and I like being here, but we're not going to be able to do the good job we need to do for the American people unless you do your job and get out there and vote. And the third request I'm going to make is I want every single person in this audience to get out there and vote for Donald Trump 10 times. Now, I know, we're Republicans. We only vote once. We do it the legal way. Here's the legal way. The New York Times is going to report tomorrow. J.D. Vance encourages voter fraud in Arizona. But the way to get out there and vote 10 times legally is to take yourself to the polls and take 9 people along with you. That is how we can vote 10 times. The legal way. So that's what I want you to do. I want you to go swampthevoteusa.com. I want you to talk about why you're voting for Donald Trump, especially on social media. And I want you to commit to getting 9 people out there to the polls. Because here's the scenario that I want you to consider. And I don't mean to give you nightmare fuel here, but I'm going to do it. We wake up on November the 6th, and Kamala Harris is barely elected President of the United States by a 700-vote margin in the state of Arizona. Think about that and ask yourself what you can do from now until then to make sure it doesn't happen. That if there's a Kamala Harris put that sign up, ladies and gentlemen. I'm telling you, she did. She's already trying to steal the 2024 election right here in this beautiful facility. But look, we get out there and we got to make sure that if this election is as tight as it could be, that we're the ones who are on the winning side and not them. And the only way to do it is to work our rear ends off for the next 2 weeks. God bless you all. Thank you. We'll take some questions from the press. But I appreciate y'all, and I appreciate your hard work on our behalf. God bless you. All righty. Thank you. Look, the fun is not over yet. We'll take some questions from the reporters before we hit the road. I think we got a microphone, sir. We'll start with you. Thank you, man.
Hey, Senator Vance. This is Sean Rice from 12 News. When these folks...
Could we turn the mic up a little bit?
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you fine. Yeah.
This is Sean Rice from 12 News here in Phoenix. When these folks hear rising inflation, what do you think is causing rising inflation, and what tangible steps will the Trump-Vance administration do to lower it for all the folks in this room?
Yes, sir. First of all, I really appreciate that question, because the number one issue on the minds of Americans is how to make life more affordable again. And that question goes right to the heart of it. And I hate to say it, but so many of your colleagues in the media are obsessed with talking about what happened 4 years ago or some fake scandal. The job of the media is to educate the American people on the issues that matter most by asking good questions. So I appreciate asking about an issue the American people talk about. So here's the big thing, okay? You have 2 major drivers of inflation over the last 3.5 years. And as much as Kamala Harris brags and says inflation is over, do any of us in this room feel like inflation is over? No, because it's not. 2 big things. Number one, when the government prints trillions of dollars, that makes the dollars that we all have less worth it, right? They become more and more worthless the more and more the government prints. Well, why is the government printing trillions and trillions of dollars? Because Kamala Harris cast the deciding vote on trillions and trillions of dollars in new spending. So Donald Trump, when we're in the White House, we're going to focus on America as a federal government living within its means. We're not going to print as much money, and we're going to make life more affordable for American citizens in the process. That's the number one thing that we can do. But here's the second thing, right? And I think a lot of people don't realize that the cost of energy is an important part of the cost of everything. Think about it. If the truck driver who's delivering the groceries to the grocery store is paying 45% more for diesel, and he is under Kamala Harris's leadership, then we're all paying more for groceries. If the guy delivering the lumber to the job site is paying 50% more for gasoline, then we're all paying more for housing. So if we want to lower prices for American citizens, we have got to unleash the American energy economy. We got to be energy dominant. That's the best way to lower prices for all of us. So look, the President Trump plan is very simple. We're going to drill, baby, drill. We're going to stop printing money we don't have, and that is going to make the American dream affordable for American citizens once again. Thank you for the question.
Hi, Ashley Rodriguez with Fox 10. So right now, if you look at national polling and polling in the swing states, it's razor thin.
That's right.
Within the margin of error. Most people have already decided who they're going to vote for. Some people have already voted, and there's very few undecided. So what is the strategy to get across the finish line?
You know, you're right that there aren't that many undecided voters, but there are a lot of undecided voters. I mean, you know, I think we could win Arizona by a few points, or we could lose it by a very tiny margin. And the question is, when you've got 5% of the electorate that has still not made up their mind, that is a big, big number with margins that are as tight as they are in Arizona and a lot of the other battleground states. And I think my message to folks who are undecided is very simple. Look, you don't have to agree with everything that I say. You don't have to agree with everything that Donald Trump says. But who can deny the results? And I'd ask those swing voters, are you better off today than you were 4 years ago? And I think for most of them, they would say no, because groceries are too high, rent is too high, the border has been opened, our public safety has gotten worse, violent crime has gotten worse. A lot of these problems are caused by bad leadership. And if we just get back to common sense leadership, we can have safe neighborhoods, a secure border, and an American life that is affordable for the majority of our citizens. Unfortunately, we don't have that right now. But Donald Trump's promise, and I think his solemn obligation as President of the United States, is to fix what Kamala Harris has broken over the last 3.5 years, and that's exactly what he's going to do. Let me make one more. Thank you. Make one more observation there. Look, I come from a family where sometimes money was very tight. I know what it means when groceries go up by 25% in 3.5 years. That means there are a lot of American families who are not getting the things that they need. When the price of energy goes up by 30, 35, 40%, that means a lot of our citizens who are choosing not to go on a vacation or choosing not to do something that they would otherwise do, again, because of bad leadership. We need to get back to common sense economic and governing principles so that the American people can afford to live a good life. That's what Donald Trump is going to do. Frankly, he already did it once before, but I think we're going to unleash, with Trump as president for a second term, a golden age of prosperity for Arizona and the whole country, but we got to get him there first. Thank you. Sir.
Hi, J.D. Vance. We talked a few weeks ago in Tucson. I'm Jose Angel from Telemundo. I want to ask you a little bit because Donald Trump has said before that he will revoke the temporary protective status of some migrants in Ohio. And I want to ask you, what's your plan? Will you support that? The same thing for migrants in different communities, not just Haitians, Venezuelans, or Mexicans in general that are applying for asylum, which is basically a program that is legally based. And what would you do with them, if you will revoke them or not?
Well, there are, of course, so many differences between Donald Trump's approach to the border and Kamala Harris's approach to the border. But this particular issue, I think that what Kamala Harris has done is she has used programs that are meant to help people who are escaping tyranny, and she's used it to grant amnesty to millions upon millions of people who have no legal right to be in the country, and that has to stop. Because here's what happens. Here's what happens when Kamala Harris grants millions upon millions of people legal status. Well, number one, they're entitled to housing benefits. So one, that's unfair to American taxpayers, but that also means a lot of American citizens are getting kicked out of their homes because they can't compete with the government-subsidized rent that a lot of illegal immigrants are getting. When you do this, I mean, in Arizona schools right now, we have got thousands upon thousands of children who can't even speak the local language in Arizona. Sometimes they don't even speak Spanish, of course, because we've got illegal immigrants coming from all over. What does that do to the education of American children when their teachers aren't teaching them, but they're focused on kids who don't have the legal right to be here? And again, nothing against the children, but we can't have a border policy that ruins the quality of American education. That is not compassionate to the American children that I have a responsibility to. So what Donald Trump has proposed doing is we're going to stop doing mass parole. We're going to stop doing mass grants of temporary protective status. Of course, you're going to have people fleeing from tyranny, but that happens on a case-by-case basis, not by waving the magic government wand and giving millions upon millions of people who don't have the right to be here legal status. It is a disgrace, and Donald Trump is going to stop it.
Hi, Senator Vance. Rachel Louise Jess with ABC 15 Arizona. Your campaign has been working particularly hard this election season to win over the votes of Native voters here in Arizona. Can you promise that they'll be able to have a seat at the table, potentially roles in your administration, should you get to the White House?
That's right. Yeah, no, I appreciate you asking that question. We really have done. We've tried to reach out to a lot of tribal Americans, a lot of Native Americans, and I've actually had some very good conversations with some of the tribal leadership all across our country. And I think, the reason why you have, I think, Native Americans coming around to Donald Trump's candidacy, and a lot of these folks haven't voted Republican maybe in their entire lives, certainly not in many, many years, is they recognize that a wide open southern border and unaffordable groceries and rent, it hits our Native communities as hard as it hits anybody else, and we've got to stop it. We've got to look out for people who have the legal right to be here. And of course, that's very true of our Native citizens. The thing I promise, both for me and also on behalf of President Trump, is, look, we're not always going to agree on every issue. We're not going to agree on every issue just in this room. And these are some pretty, diehard folks in this room, right? But what I always promise is we're always going to listen to people, and Native and tribal folks are always going to have a seat at the table, right? Because sometimes, and this has been an interesting learning experience for me, is you assume that a particular tribe is going to come out one way on an issue, and then you sit down and talk to them, and they actually have a totally different perspective than what you thought they would have had. The only way to know where folks are coming from is to actually talk to them. And that's something that Donald Trump and I really believe in, is talking to the American people. One final thing on this, it's not related to the Native issue in particular, but one of the things that I think really separates Donald Trump's approach to leadership and Kamala Harris's approach to leadership is Donald Trump believes in persuading your fellow citizens and not trying to censor them. And I think it's a really... whether it's Kamala Harris putting pressure on big tech companies to censor her fellow citizens, whether it's calling people racist for daring to believe that we ought to actually have border security in the United States of America, Kamala Harris is obsessed with silencing her fellow citizens. Donald Trump and I believe we ought to talk to one another. And that's the best way to actually make your case to the American people, is if they disagree with you, have a conversation with them. Don't try to shut up the citizens of your own country. That is not what American leaders should do. Let's do two more questions, then we're going to have to hit the road. Sir.
Hi, Senator Vance. Wayne Shutsky with KJZZ News. We heard Mayor Beck mention the Taiwan Semiconductor facility in North Phoenix. That facility, along with many others in Arizona, are recipients of CHIPS Act funding, which former President Trump has criticized on occasion. So my question is, if elected, what would the Trump-Vance administration, how would it handle administering CHIPS Act funding moving forward?
Yeah, so I just want to be clear here that President Trump, more than any political leader of my lifetime, believes in bringing American manufacturing back to the United States of America, and that includes semiconductors. And one of the things that President Trump makes this point all the time is that part of the leverage that communist China has over us is that they control the market for semiconductors, for computer chips, which computer chips are in everything, right? They're not just in our phones, they're in our cars, they're in our laptops, they're in our refrigerators. We have got to make more of this stuff in the United States of America, and we're thrilled about the expansion of operations in Arizona. That's a very good thing. President Trump, what he has criticized sometimes is the administration under Kamala Harris's leadership, the way that we try to force these companies. Look, give you two options. Option one is we say we need to do more chip manufacturing in the United States of America. Let's lower energy costs and let's encourage businesses to produce as many chips in America as possible. That's option A. That is what Trump thinks that we should be doing, encouraging more manufacturing. What you've seen under Secretary Raimondo and Kamala Harris is them trying to say that you're only going to get money to manufacture chips if you do what we want you to do politically. And I think that's not a way to run an economy in this country. I frankly don't care if you agree with us on this political issue or disagree with us. So long as you're paying your workers a good wage and building a great American product, Donald Trump and I will be on your side. That will happen every single day of our administration. But this thing you see with Kamala Harris where she says we're going to hold your government funding hostage unless you agree with our politics. You see this in the banking sector, them trying to say we're not going to allow you to open a bank account if you don't agree with us. You see this with social media. We're not going to allow you to have a social media company unless you toe the progressive line. We want American business to build great products. Cut out the political BS. Let people do what they want to do. And if you disagree with them, talk to them about it. Don't try to shut their business down. Final question.
Dennis Welch with CBS 5 and 3 TV. Simple question. We're 2 weeks away from... Got a lot of fans here, as you can hear.
Just one. I just heard one. Yeah. That's okay. Go ahead, Dennis.
We'll end with this question. The election is 2 weeks from today. I'm not going to be asking you about 4 years ago, but from what you've seen, from what you've learned, are you confident in the Arizona election system, and are you going to accept the results moving forward?
Well, look, I think that we're in a better place than we were in 2020. And I think that what we're going to keep on working on over the next couple of weeks, I mean, you saw this even in 2022. Where some of the voting machines in Maricopa went down on Election Day. Now, whether you think that was just incompetence or something else, it's not okay. We want every legal ballot to be cast and to be counted in the United States of America. So we're going to keep on fighting for election integrity. But look, Dennis, sitting here today, are we going to get this perfect? Of course we're not going to get it perfect, but we're doing a hell of a lot better in 2024 than we were in 2020. So the best message that I can give is to get out there and vote through whatever method makes the most sense. And look, I'm one of these guys, I don't love election season. I like election day. But as President Trump said, it is what it is. And if we're going to have early voting and mail-in voting and election day voting, then we need to take advantage of every opportunity we have to vote. Get out there and make your voices heard. And yes, I think we're going to have a good election in Arizona in 2024. Let me, if I can, offer just one final thought here, and then we're going to have to hit the road, unfortunately. I want you. I'll be back. Don't worry. You'll get sick of me over the next 2 weeks. Look, I want you to think of really what this election is about. And I think those of us who care a lot about politics, sometimes it's red jerseys versus blue jerseys. We really want to beat the Democrats. And of course, we do really want to beat the Democrats. And it's going to be very fun to beat Kamala Harris on November the 5th. Trust me, I'm going to be as happy as anybody. But the goal here is to beat the Democrats in the service of solving the country's problems that have been caused by years of Kamala Harris's broken leadership, not just as vice president, but over many, many years. I think she keeps on making bad decisions for the American people, and we want to take away her ability to do that. We want to get to a point where Kamala Harris's bad decisions is something she can deal with, not that 330 million of our fellow citizens have to deal with, right? That's what the election is all about. But let me give you just a couple of examples of what happens when our leadership is not doing a good job. So the first is I met a woman when I was campaigning a few weeks back, and she's a retiree, and her husband is about to be a retiree, but he's still got a couple years left in his working life. And they're raising their grandchildren. Their grandparents who are raising their grandchildren because their daughter died of a fentanyl overdose. And they were telling me about a ritual, and these are the family rituals that make life worth living, that for 40 years, in good times and bad, they would do steak night on Friday night. And that was their thing. And I'm not talking about going to a fancy steakhouse. I'm talking about going to a grocery store and buying a nice steak and grilling it out, and they did it every Friday. They stopped doing it about a year ago because under Kamala Harris's rising grocery prices, they just can't afford anymore with their grandkids that they're raising. They couldn't afford to do steak night anymore. And think about what it means for a family to sacrifice a little ritual like that after 40 years of doing it, and then to be deprived of that thing. These are the things that actually make our life worth living. And one of the things that we're trying to do is build an economy that is prosperous enough where if you work hard and play by the rules, you can enjoy to have steak night on a Friday night. That's what we want for every single one of our citizens. Now, I know very personally, actually, because I grew up in a family, again, that didn't always have a whole lot of money. And I know this is maybe not as big of an issue in Arizona as it is in Ohio. But I remember when it got really cold and money was especially tight, my grandmother would sometimes say, you know what, we're going to throw a few extra blankets on the bed. We're not going to turn on the heating tonight because we can't afford it. And I think that in a country with as unlimited the energy resources that we have, we ought to fight for the right of every citizen. So again, so long as they work hard and play by the rules, every single one of our citizens should be able to heat their home in the middle of a cold winter night. But that has gotten harder. That's gotten harder because energy prices are 45% higher than they were 3.5 years ago because Kamala Harris has gone to war on the American energy sector. So when we go out there for the next 2 weeks, as we're getting our friends to vote, as we're helping our friends to get to the polls, as we're talking to people about why we want to make Donald Trump the next president of the United States, just remember, we're out there every single day fighting for the right of our citizens to have steak night on a Friday night. We're fighting for the right of our citizens to be able to turn on the heating in the middle of a cold winter night. We are fighting for peace and prosperity for the American people, and that's why we're getting out there and making Donald Trump the next president of the United States. Let's do it together, my friends. We got 2 weeks to go. Let's make it happen. God bless you. I love you, Arizona. We'll be back.